Hello guys, Crispy here and welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, we're going to be testing Spider-Man Remastered on the minimum and recommended system requirements of the game. So let's take a look at the minimum requirements first. It asks for Windows 10 64-bit, that's exactly what we're running here, an Intel Core i3-4160 3.6 GHz, that's the CPU that we're using as well. It also asks for an AMD equivalent, but well, we got the i3, 8 GB of RAM. We got that in dual channel. It's DDR3 1600 MHz. For the graphics card, it asks for an Nvidia GTX 950 or AMD Radeon RX 470. Now, this is very interesting over here because the 470 is around like twice as fast as the GTX 950, and not only that, the 950 is a 2 GB GPU and the RX 470 comes in 4 or 8 GB variants. Anyway, of course we went with the GTX 950, the slower card over here, and it's the Gigabyte Gaming OC model of the card. Lastly, it asks for 75 GB of available space. I have installed it on a 1 TB SSD. Now, for the recommended requirements, it asks for the Intel Core i5-4670. I don't have this exact CPU, but I have the 4670K, which is just an overclockable 4670. So of course we're gonna leave the K variant at stock. For the memory, it asks for 16 GB of RAM. We went with 2x8 GB dual channel kit right here, 1600 MHz DDR3, just normal stuff again. And for the graphics card, it asks for the GTX 1060 6GB model or the Radeon RX 588 GB. I chose the GTX 1060 6GB model right here because, well, it's actually slightly slower than the RX 588 GB. It also has a little bit less VRAM and, well, it's more popular. Let's get into the game now with the minimum requirements, shall we? And we're in the desktop. Everything is installed along with the latest Nvidia drivers here, which this GPU still supports, by the way. And yeah, you can see all of the specs here. And let's start our game now. I think we should go with the 1080p resolution and the lowest settings possible since this is minimum requirements, right? And a 2 GB graphics card. Finally, after like 40 seconds, we got this little logo there. And we're in. Kind of. Where is the city? There should be a city behind me. Huh. This is very interesting, guys. I'm not sure if I want to hit continue before the city loads. Oh boy. You know what? Let's do it anyways. Who cares? Oh,
dock down.
We're here. I actually thought it wouldn't load anything, but hey, we're here. It is a bit stuttery, probably, very likely, because the CPU is completely maxed out, the VRAM is completely maxed out, and the RAM is completely maxed out. It has these insane stops, you know, out of nowhere. So maybe we should lower the resolution next. Or maybe try some FSR. It is not terrible, let's say that, and CPU usage finally went down from 100%, so maybe from now on it's going to be a little bit smoother. I really hope so. It also does drop from 30 frames per second from time to time, as you can see, but I guess that's GPU related? Like, because the GPU is completely maxed out, you know? So yeah, using some FSR or dropping the resolution might make this pretty playable. That's really surprising. This is a 10-year-old CPU, basically, and an entry-level one at the time as well. The dual-core, you know? It's a freaking dual-core running a huge open-world game like Spider-Man Remastered, and it still manages to look decent. You know what? I thought it was gonna be worse, honestly, especially because the menu kind of ran worse than this in terms of the loading times and stuff. Yeah, very interesting, guys. So let's try like FSR 2.1 on balanced, okay? I'm gonna start counting the FPS here, and maybe we should try it with the FPS locked, you know, to 30 frames, because it's gonna improve stability by a lot and lower CPU utilization as well. So it might actually stop the stuttering issues. Unfortunately, it is still dropping oh my god, not slightly. It's actually dropping by a lot here. Look at that. We saw like cinematic frame rates for a second. That's terrible. Oh my god. All right. We're not running out of RAM anymore, by the way. You can see 7.6 GB roughly, so That's okay, but when you get to this area for some reason, especially if you look in that direction fast, it drops to 23 frames per second. Like, for a single-player title, it's not terrible. I am still able to swing around and stuff like that. Obviously, this part of the city is the most intensive part, at least for the CPU to render. As well as GPU, it gets really close in performance compared to the Central Park area. I guess Central Park is slightly more GPU-bound, but it's only slightly. So this is a good area to benchmark the game at, for sure. And obviously, if we aren't really swinging far up into the sky and taking a look at the entire city and stuff, it shouldn't really drop too much, at least from 30 frames per second. As you can see, it's getting 30-ish consistently. That's quite nice. For a dual core with 4 threads, I thought it was going to be a little bit worse. Now, let's go ahead and lock it to 30 FPS to see if we can get rid of the stuttering, and it definitely can, dude. This is definitely the way to go, my friends. If you have this game with a dual core with 4 threads, at least from the 4th generation and up, it is gonna be playable, as long as you lock the FPS to 30, as you can see. And it's quite a decent experience and smooth one as well. Wow. That means that if you have something better than a 950 as well, you could possibly play this game at like medium or high settings, lock it to 30 FPS, and as long as you don't get 99% GPU utilization, it's going to stay at 30 frames per second for the most part. Still has a couple of frame time spikes every now and again, but it's not really game-breaking. I think I could enjoy the game like this, honestly. Now, 720p resolution without any upscaling, alright. VRAM usage went down by a little bit, as well as RAM utilization. It's not swapping any of the information that should be on VRAM into the RAM right now, at least. VRAM is still going up, though. Now, it's consistently above 30 FPS. It hasn't dropped so far. It's more often in the 40s than in the 30s. And I would call this a minimum requirements experience, for sure. Like, it's 720p, it's not amazing, but it's still seeable, I guess. You could still play like this, especially on a smaller monitor. And as long as it stays above 30 FPS 100% of the time, I think it's spot on minimum requirements. Look at this. Okay, 28. So sometimes it will drop still if you need to load in all of the houses and stuff like that, all of the city. But again, this is not because of the CPU, it's because of the graphics card. It's at 99% utilization, and once again, if I select 30 FPS right here for the frame limit, it gets 30 flat all of the time. Or almost all of the time. Minimum requirements provide a playable experience. Not amazing, but it's a little bit better than what I expected, for sure. And I mean, I think a lot of people would enjoy the game like this. I wouldn't buy it for like 40 bucks, which is what it costs right now on the Steam summer sale. But yeah, if you can grab it for like 20 bucks or lower, I guess this isn't too bad. Let's move on now to the recommended system requirements. So for recommended requirement settings, I think we should try it at 1080p, definitely. And I'm gonna use some TAA here just to smooth out those edges. Those are very, very jaggy here in Spider-Man Remastered. And I'm also gonna utilize like the high settings preset. This one actually loaded much faster than the i3 system, guys, even though we still have 4 logical threads in our system. But this is the true quad-core processor. And let's hit continue. And we could also see the city behind Spider-Man this time. Nice. Alrighty. So we still see 100% CPU utilization here, and the i5 is a bottleneck to our 1066GB. You can see that GPU usage is not maxed out, most of the time at least. I think if we see the entire city from above again, it will definitely max it out. Yep, 99% already. But the frame time is much smoother than it was on the i3 4160, and it's getting like 40 plus. Oh my god, no! Okay, so 3 FPS, 1% lows again. Never mind, much smoother, it's actually the same. We just needed to get to a more intensive area, I guess. Alrighty. Well, let's wait a little bit because we saw that i3's CPU utilization going down after like 2 or 3 minutes of gameplay. And with the i5, it should also happen. Unless this game has a problem with hyper-threading and hyper-threaded cores utilization. Well, after 3 minutes of gameplay, guys, we finally dropped CPU utilization. So it indeed happened. Oh, but now as I started touching the camera, it went up to 100% again. Okay, well, we gotta live with this for a little bit. If it starts stuttering like crazy, I will lock our FPS to 30 again. But now we're seeing a little bit more fluctuation in the CPU usage, so I guess now it should be a little bit better, guys, okay? And in terms of FPS, it's much better than before, and right now the 1% lows aren't in the single digits anymore, so it's also a lot more stable, although they're not perfect, you know. 27 FPS, 1% lows indicates a lot of little stuttering, and you can see in the frame time graph that it is very unstable with a quad-core processor. But again, that's to be expected, I guess. It's 4 cores, 4 threads. An i7 from this generation would probably be way more adequate for recommended requirements, you know? Alright, let's take a look at the entire city here. 98%, 99% GPU usage. So it is completely GPU bound, and it still drops from 30 FPS, but it's only in this occasion right here, okay? Taking a look at the entire map from above is extremely intensive for these GPUs. It's going to become a lot better if we lock it to like 35 frames per second. It should be capable of achieving that pretty much like 98% of the time, aside from when you see the entire city from above, and that's exactly the case. You can see a much smoother frame time graph now. We still keep the high settings here, which look really nice, especially compared to very low. Like the shadows look much better, reflections look much better in those buildings in that direction. We're gonna see that in just a little bit. The textures as well. The pop-in is better, although not completely solved, you know. Like you can see those buildings in front of us are still loading in slowly, but now it should be a completely consistent experience and pretty playable, and those extra 5 FPS compared to 30 frames per second are actually making a bit of a difference to the smoothness of the game. It's not as bad as 30 frames per second for sure. It feels alright. CPU utilization is never maxed out now, and the 6GB of VRAM on this 1060 are more than enough for 1080p high settings. It's doing a really good job, actually. I haven't seen a single stutter in that frame time graph yet. So that means that with the 950 we were seeing stuttering even with capped FPS because of that VRAM, or maybe because of the RAM as well, because 8GB I don't think are enough for this game, at least for a smooth experience throughout. And finally, we are in the Central Park area, still getting pretty good FPS, capped 35, 100% of the time, okay? Aside from when you see the city from above again, then it's gonna drop into the lower 30s, and even from 30 in a single scenario. But I mean, this is pretty good. It's better than like a PS4 experience or maybe PS4 Pro experience, although that's at 4K, but it's 30 FPS, and this is 35 FPS, which again is a little bit better and definitely feels smoother than 30. So that's been it for this one, my friends. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. Love you all. Bye-bye.